Hey guys, welcome back to r/entitledpeople. In this video, a crazy vegan Karen squares up with a farmer to save animals and trespasses on his farm. Let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. And the title story starts like this. So many stories on Reddit like this one are about Americans doing insane things to other Americans. I don't think I would ever try to claim that the US is the only place where narcissistic people commit massively misguided acts against each other. I just think that the US happens to be the country that flaunts its crazies more than any other in the global landscape. Anyway, you can understand my shock when I actually had someone give me a prime story to tell on a farm in South Africa. So here comes a reminder to tell you all that Karens are not exclusive to the States. So my mother was the daughter of the man who ran the farm that my father worked on as a young man. Even though he hired my father for a fair wage and actually treated him well when it was not expected, that did not mean that he was truly a man to look up to. This offer to let my father work was truly the bare minimum, as he viewed my father as a lesser human because he came from a poverty-ridden ghetto in Johannesburg. The moment that my mother and father revealed that they were in love and wanted to be together, my grandpa disowned my mom and nearly managed to kill my father in an act of aggression that was quickly forgiven by law enforcement. When my grandfather passed away, my parents were able to make an offer on the farm through a surrogate and purchase the farm. Once they had it, they completely transformed it to an ethical farm with a positive ecological footprint. This was my parents' way to remove the shadow that existed over the early years of their relationship while providing a future for me that I could sustain and grow with once they were no longer able to work on the farm. So as you can tell, this farm is far beyond a just livelihood for me. It's a representation of the beauty of my family overcoming a horrific system in South Africa to build a life they could be proud of. Imagine my shock when protesters began to make an appearance in the community. They began to attack the farms, calling them damaging to the ecology and disgustingly unethical in their treatment of animals. I will agree that there were farms in the area that did not follow all of the ethical practices that I did, but still, there was no use of dangerous pesticides and many of the farms had safeguards against overusing the soil. It felt obvious that the protesters were just of the type that has misguided or misinformed beliefs and refused to abide by anyone disagreeing with them. Unfortunately, South Africa is still not colorblind. This is one factor that makes me thank God every day that I'm able to sustain my way of life independently. When the protests rose up though, I was a target for many of the demonstrations because I was less likely to report the issue. I knew that I could trust local law enforcement, but they could not do anything about the protests that were peaceful. I stomached the harassment just fine as long as I could do my work. Well, apparently, this patience on my part was a sign for certain protesters that they simply had not done enough to get their point across. I ended up having to hire security for the times that I had to leave the farm and install cameras after I woke up a few mornings in a row to damage on my property. Funnily enough, I even woke up one morning to one of my dairy cows slaughtered with some sort of message on how I had mistreated the animals for so long and only saw it as meat anyway. So they killed an animal that had years left in it to protest me killing other animals. Well, the protests in so many of these situations are so obviously misguided. Anyway, cameras were installed and security was hired for my scheduled outings each week. All the guerrilla attacks on my farm were stopped, and apparently there was a Karen who took this loss of secrecy to mean that she should just commit fully. Someone did not tell her the difference between peaceful, open protesting and destructive, secretive protesting, and she just considered the whole thing to fit under one umbrella. So I'm working the farm one day and Karen trespasses onto my private property to begin harassing me when I go about ignoring the loudmouthed complaining. All I take the time to say to her is, "Ma'am, if you would please not enter my property, I would appreciate it." She babbles on with her misinformed nonsense and I ignore her. It would not be the first time that I had someone step onto my land, and even if I had footage as proof, just trespassing would not be worth attempting the legal system. It began to feel like I was giving Karen one screwed up tour as I went around feeding the animals and she followed me at every step. She insulted me for keeping chickens and then yelped when they got near her. She spouted nonsense about how monstrous I could be to raise a cow from a calf with it eating from my hands just to slaughter it, and then scrunched up her nose in disgust at the smell of a cow and whined at the sight of the cow patties. Finally, I turned to her before I could continue on with my morning work and said, "Karen, if you don't mind, I'm trying to get my work done. These animals need to be fed. Let me make something clear to you. If your protests bring an end to my farm, these animals will either all die or go somewhere else that will treat them the same as I do, and likely with even worse treatment. You're not saving anyone. Your farm would just be the first. I will create an end to this enslavement and slaughter. I will save these animals. Don't act as if I'm the illogical one when you continue to eat products from animals that cannot consent or understand the horror of their treatment. Veganism is the future of humanity. She was getting up in my face as she ranted. I kept myself calm. Karen, I don't believe that you're the best person to come at me with anger about enslavement and mistreatment. If I thought she was angry before, I had not seen anything. The fact that you would bring race into this just shows that you're the one judging me because you're jealous of my skin tone. I did not ask to be born white, just as much as that cow did not ask to be violated every day for her milk. I could not help but to egg it on. It felt good to see someone actually spin their wheels making up arguments just for me to shut them down. Silence before the protesters grated on me after a point. Ma'am, that is a bull. I don't recommend you try to milk it. Steam practically rose from her head and she reddened. I had placidly left her speechless for a moment and took this as my cue to go on about my business. I moved along, continuing my chores with the cows. I was about ready to leave the barn, but I did not want to leave the unusually silent Karen alone. I turned to get her attention only to find that she had grabbed a pitchfork and was holding it over the neck of one of my dairy cows. She looked at me with crazed eyes and yelled, "I will use your devil tool against you, demon. If you won't free them, then I will." She really had not thought this situation through though. Not the least of her issues is that pitchforks are not the sharpest tools and cows have thick skin. I doubt she could have killed the cow without a hell of a lot of time to work the prongs in. Still though, I did not treat the threat as an empty one. I immediately ran over to stop her from even trying to hurt one of my cows, and there was apparently quite a bit of force behind my dash because when I grabbed the pitchfork, I also ran into Karen. She was thrown back into the wall without any noticeable attempt to hold onto the weapon. She was winded and obviously enraged. I kept the pitchfork low and close to my abdomen, threatening the cow had been erratic. I had no clue what she would do next. She gathered her breath a bit and then spat towards my feet. "Did I say demon? You're the devil!" "Karen, you just tried— well, you threatened to kill a perfectly healthy animal that has years left in her." I glanced over my shoulder to ensure that there was a camera trained on this location. Karen closed the distance between us and launched a punch at my face. She obviously did not know how to throw a punch. I responded by hitting her with the handle of the pitchfork. Her face and the wood made a satisfying thud and she crumpled to the ground. It was so comically not a true fight with how slow everything happened. I was trying to make sure all the motions were slow enough that it was obvious who was at fault here, but still I had not expected her to be knocked unconscious. It does say something that I immediately felt a bit of panic when I saw that I had knocked her unconscious, wondering if I would be placed at fault for this. I called the police though and the paramedics after dismissing this anxiety. I made a preliminary check with a lawyer, and once he agreed I would surely win the case with my footage, I ended up suing Karen before she could try anything of the sort against me again. And yes, the trial was an easy win. She spent some time in jail and the local police now had precedent to increase protection for farms in the night hours and put limiting factors on the protesters. I wish I could say that I got her some serious jail time or huge fines, but considering she did not manage to do any damage to anything, she mostly got a slap on the wrist for trespassing and assault. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So my family is a total disaster, and I just wanted to start everything off by saying that I am fully aware of that. I am an only child and raised by only my father for most of my life. While I don't have any siblings, my father has 2 siblings that I've seen maybe a handful of times only in my life. He does not like having anything to do with them or their children. What I was told from him was that they were very entitled people and similar to my grandparents who I never met. My dad seemed to be the black sheep of the family, and I could not be luckier to have him as my father instead of being part of my relative's family. From what I understand, they are typical trash who cannot keep jobs, are on and off unemployment all the time, get drunk, do drugs, etc. I think you get the picture. They are not the best kind of people to be around. The thing is though, they are entitled, like they are rich and think that the world should be handed to them. They talk a lot about how when they go on unemployment, it should last for however long it takes them to get a new job. They think that their food stamp card should allow them to buy lottery tickets, and because it cannot, it's just another thing keeping them down. Don't get me wrong, I know there are a lot of issues in this country and people are struggling. However, these people are just being lazy and wanting the taxpayer and my dad to just give them things they want. And here OP is obviously talking about these entitled relatives. So anyway, my dad worked hard and made a pretty nice living for himself and supporting me as a child. I fell into his footsteps and went to college for computer science. The only times we really hear from our relatives is when they are asking him for a loan or to invest in their business opportunity, which they never explain and just say how much they want him to give them towards it. Since he always says no, they are bitter, and when my father passed away from cancer, I have expected them not to bother showing up. Instead though, they came to the funeral and to their respect actually seemed to act appropriately for the entire service. It was not until we all went back to my house that they started saying things that made me realize their true intentions. They were saying that it was so nice of my father to own property because the two of them could move in there and even bring my cousins. My father had a will that pretty much left me everything, which was all of the money and the property that he owned. Still, I listened to them go on about how they were going to spend the money that they were gonna get. It went from keeping the house to them saying how they would sell it and split the money to be able to buy themselves nicer places to live than where they were at the moment. Keep in mind, they all lived in trailers and were hoping with the money to buy a couple small houses instead. I finally broke it to them that Dad actually left me the house and all of the money. They went from 0 to 100 in seconds and were raging that I had some nerve trying to steal everything and not share it with them. They were saying that they were family too, and if my dad were still alive, he would not believe how horrible I was treating them. While my uncle was reaming me out and saying that I was spoiled and did not deserve anything my father had left, I did not notice that my aunt had disappeared. I found out that she was going around my house looking for the key to my dad's place. I was angry and I threw all of them out of my house so I could mourn in peace. I could not believe them for acting that way after their own brother had died. Not a single call or visit when he was sick, but he dies and they show up basically bragging about the money they are gonna get. The next few weeks I get calls from them saying that if I sell the house they deserve a right to have some of the money and threaten to sue me if I don't do what they tell me. I was avoiding them and now knew why my father never wanted anything to do with them. Even when dying, he did not ask about his family or try to contact them in any way or form. I just could not be so cold to not tell them he died and invite them to the funeral. I already had a home that I loved and moving an hour away just did not seem to make any sense to me. My father had always raised me to be happy for the things I had and to know that there were people that had way less than I did. Due to this, I figured that the best thing I could do to honor my father was to give my entire inheritance away to charity. I gave away all the money to reputable charities I knew my father liked to give to when he was alive. As for the house, I found a charity that had a deal with a specific real estate company. The way it worked was that if you wanted to forfeit the home to charity, the real estate agency would sell it, not take any seller commission on it, and then give the entire profit to charity. They would then take the money and use it to help build houses for homeless people. I really liked how that sounded and I wish I could remember what it was called to post it here for all of you, but for the life of me I can't. Anyway, that is what I ended up doing, and I guess my relatives had been keeping an eye on the house and saw it was sold because I started getting angry calls again. They told me that they knew I sold the house and they were gonna sue me if I did not give them each their fair share of the profit. The real estate sign had been up for a while, so I guess they were keeping tabs and saw when it came down. Anyway, I did not do anything and I got a letter from a lawyer saying that I was being sued and blah blah blah. I got my own lawyer who had a copy of the will, the receipt that I gave the money, and house to charity, and a notice from me saying if they did not stop I would countersue for harassment. Nothing came of their lawsuit, but that is not quite the end of the story though. See, they were so confident that they were gonna get the money from the house that they already sold their trailers and had lied about having the money to get the small house they wanted. Without that money though, they were found in violation of the contract and I think fraud that showed they had the money, thinking they would by the point they were found out. But anyway, they ended up getting in huge trouble, losing the houses and only having enough money to buy an even older and smaller trailer that the two of them had to share until they could get enough money to do something else. animals. I know it sounds mean to say that I am happy my relatives got screwed over, but I was so mad at them for what they did. The fact that they did not even treat my dad as family and instead like a piggy bank they could take from. To me, they are only my family because of blood, and if I never have to hear from them again, I would be more than fine. To me, my family was my father, and after years of him talking about his horrible siblings, I finally got to see firsthand why they were so bad, and he avoided them at all costs. And here, Ripe Stars, for me personally, it is always sad to see how money can divide a family and can turn family members or relatives into actual enemies. You know, you always see it in movies, and thankfully I don't think that would ever happen in my family, especially because we don't have that many family members anyway, but it is still sad to see, and I hope you never go through something like the OP in this story. Either way, if you enjoyed this story, I would very much appreciate it if you could post a comment and like the video to boost the algorithm. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled Tree Bench vs HOA. This one was posted by user Mickey Sunshine54 on our own subreddit r/Ripestories. So I am now a 66-year-old female, and this is a true story. I lived in an HOA for 9 years. When I was 52, I bought a house in an HOA community. It had a beautiful bottle brush tree in the front yard, and I had always wanted a tree bench where I could sit and enjoy the neighborhood, plus they give such character to a property, so I had one put in. A few weeks after it was installed, a neighbor came by to tell me that there were kids using the bench to climb onto the tree. Oh, a lawsuit waiting to happen. I quickly ordered a sign that stated, "Don't climb this tree, climb your own tree." Owner will not be responsible for any injuries incurred from ignoring this warning. It was written in bright bold red letters on a white background. Clearly a warning. I nailed the sign, it was a metal one, to the tree, and that was that. Until I got a letter from the HOA telling me that signs were not allowed in the front of the houses. I checked and there was no such rule in the bylaws or anywhere else. So I wrote and asked them to show me where the rule was. They came back saying it was the county rule not to place signs on trees. Okay, I agreed that was fair, took the sign of the tree and put it on the back of the bench right under where it had been before. Mind you, the addition of the tree bench had been approved by the HOA before it was installed. I tend to follow rules when reasonable. A few weeks later I got another letter telling me again I had to remove the sign. I thought about it and wrote them the following day. Dear HOA, I'm not removing the warning sign from the front of my house, which is now on the bench and not on the tree. I will, however, remove it if you will take full and complete responsibility and liability for anyone, child or adult, who climbs my tree and gets hurt or otherwise injured. My insurance company advised me that putting up a warning sign was the only way to avoid being held liable for injuries, hence the posted sign. Please advise me if you would still like me to remove the sign and that you will take on any liability resulting from any injury incurred falling from my tree. I then never heard from them again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, that is how you deal with HOAs. You show them the reality of their stupid rules and demands. Massive props to OP. The next one is titled, Am I the jerk for disowning my family? This one was posted by user RPGgamer042 on r/Ripestories. So guys, I'm a fairly new Ripe viewer and it gives me a pleasant distraction from the overwhelming anxiety and builds the void where friends would be if I had any. So just for context and understanding, I grew up and I'm still fairly active in the prominent religion in Utah, and our faith believes families can exist after we die, instead of until death do us apart. However, there are certain ceremonies and rituals that we believe God has asked us to do to achieve this, kind of like your dad lets you use the car if all your chores are done. We will just refer to this as mom's work, and these rituals can only be done once. I really try to be a good person and it takes a lot to get me mad. If you get me so angry that I'm shaking though, you really don't want to do that. With that understanding, up to the story. So my mom passed away just as COVID started in Utah. Flash forward to this summer when my sister, who I will call Tiffany, which is not her real name. Tiffany lives in Alaska but comes to Utah with her 3 kids ages 12 to 17 for what I believe to be a bury the hatchet gathering, as the family was never really close. For context on this, I went to a scout camp when I was like 12 where the leaders handed a letter from our family for us to read. The only letter I got was in my sister's handwriting and said, "OP, we love you, but we don't." I asked Tiffany about mom's work, and a few other family members who passed that also needed their work done, and she gave no answer. It was almost as though she didn't hear me, par for the course for me. Later that day I texted her about mom's work and still no answer. 3 days later she flies back to Alaska, and there is silence until last night when I hear she is doing mom's work as well as the work for the other family who have died. I ask why she didn't do it here so that we can at least be there, as she was our mom too. One of our older brothers, Jason, accused me of being a bully and a few other things that I honestly don't remember, as I deleted the text and blocked them because I was shaking out of blind rage. I was super pissed. Then this morning I learned that most of my family had been discussing it off and on ever since mom's funeral, and I never heard a single word about it. I was never included in any discussions. I blocked them all. Am I the jerk? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments if you think that OP is the jerk in this family drama situation or not. Anyway, the next one is titled Mistaken ID, posted by user Scarlet Rhine, and it starts like this. This happened pre-pandemic and I find it mildly humorous. I used to own an RV, and because I didn't have a driver's license, a friend of mine drove me. My friend is not around anymore, but we kept ourselves sane. Anyhow, me and a late friend were driving back to LA in my RV, and it's getting close to lunchtime, so we pull into a McDonald's. No sooner we had both stepped out of the RV and I saw the manager storming up to us. No sooner he gets up to us, he shouts, MDM, I thought I told you to never come back. Both of us, huh? Manager, I threw you two out yesterday for disturbing the peace. Friend, this is the first time we've been here. Manager, bullpucky. I threw you out at 5 PM and banned you. Now leave. Friend, no, we just got here and we were miles away from here at 5 PM. Manager, bullcrap, I'm calling the cops. Friend, you do that. OP, go get our receipt. I go into the RV because we still had our receipt inside, in the trash but still inside. I get the receipt, which was from Carl's Jr., and rejoin my friend and waited for the police to arrive. As soon as they arrive, the manager storms out and tells them, those two are trespassing, run them off as I banned them yesterday. My friend said he couldn't have banned us because we were at another place at 5. Here, look at this receipt. Note, receipts at fast food joints have the time and date printed on them. The police officer took the receipt, looked at it, while the McDonald's manager's face drained of color as it dawned on him what he had just done. I swear he could have dressed up as the mascot at that moment. The police officer then said to the manager, these two could press charges on you if they choose to. He then looked to us and asked, do you want to press charges? Both of us, no. Me, we just want lunch. We got our large Big Mac combo with Diet Coke on the house. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious if something like this has ever happened to you in real life. Has anyone ever mistaken you for an employee? Let us know in the comments if you have any stories to share. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/malicious compliance. This one is titled, You're Not Paid to Think. Okay, so I didn't. So a few years ago, I worked as a copywriter at a small PR agency run by a tyrant of a boss. Let's call her Marcy. She was all about control. One day during a strategy meeting, I pointed out a huge flaw in a campaign that could have cost our client major money. Her response? You're not paid to think, you're paid to write what I tell you. Okay, cool, I got it. From that point on, I followed her instructions exactly. No suggestions, no edits, no heads up when things were obviously going sideways, just pure flawless compliance. Within 2 months, 2 major clients left over tone-deaf campaigns. One I had tried to fix but was explicitly told not to. Guess who got blamed? Yes, it was me. Guess who kept receipts? Also me. I forwarded my "just doing what you told me" email chain to HR, and it turns out this was not the first complaint. She was restructured out of the company 3 weeks later. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.